Amanda is my brother's girlfriend. At the time of this story, she was apartment shopping so she could move out of her parents' house. She decided not to move in with my brother quite yet, since they had only been together for a few months. Instead, she started searching for a roommate online. Browsing Craigslist, she found an ad titled, "Roommate Wanted, Females Only." These ads were common in the area she was looking at because it was mostly filled with young professionals. The listing was for a room in a house for about $225 a month, which was quite cheap compared to most of the places listed. The occupant described herself as a 23-year-old college student who wasn't comfortable living with males. The new roommate would get their own room and attached bathroom. Amanda was interested in the place, but the listing only had a single photo outside of the property. Curious, Amanda emailed the occupant asking to meet her and tour the house. Within 30 minutes, she received a reply with details of when to stop by. The girl worked late hours and wanted Amanda to come over at 8 p.m. When Amanda arrived, there was a handwritten note on the front door that said, "Door broken, use back door." While walking around the house, she thought it looked nice but slightly unkempt. Tall grass, weeds, dusty windows. Still, she decided to continue. When she knocked on the door, an older man opened up. At first, Amanda thought she had the wrong house, but the man assured her that he was the landlord and that the occupant had asked him to show the apartment since she was at work later than expected. He seemed pleasant and offered to show her around. Amanda noticed a few things that made her feel uncomfortable, but she wasn't at red alert yet. First, the guy was unshaven and looked like he lived out of his car. Also, only the kitchen light was on, and even though the landlord was polite about answering questions, he seemed irritable about keeping lights on for too long. As they walked around the house, Amanda noticed one huge red flag. No furniture. Nothing. There was also a room that the landlord refused to show her, telling her that it was the occupant's room and he didn't want to invade her privacy. Walking down the hallway to the living room, she noticed a plank nailed across the front door. Broken, for sure. Amanda's creepometer started to ding, so she decided to wrap up the tour and leave, but tried to sound polite. As she's giving the landlord her thanks for the showing bit, he perks up and tells her that he forgot to show her the basement. According to him, it was recently furnished and would make a great rec room, and she should take a look before leaving. Amanda and the landlord were standing in the hallway between the living room in the front of the house and the kitchen in the back. The door was in this hallway, and when he opened it, it opened outward, creating a barrier between Amanda and the back door. The basement was pitch black. He smiled, motioned down the stairs, and said, "Ladies first." What happened next was an unbelievable stroke of luck. Amanda got a text message just as someone was parking in front of the house. Thinking on her feet, she pretended it was a phone call. "Hey, yeah, are you here? I'll come out from around the back and let you in. It's great, you have to see it." With a motion of confidence, she excused herself around the landlord and walked out the back door. He watched her go with a confused expression on his face. Once outside, she sprinted to her car and sped out of there. When Amanda got home, she told her mom and my brother everything. Police were called, they took her statements, and went to investigate. The house had been foreclosed more than 6 months earlier, and the property had been abandoned. When the police investigated, they found that the closed room the landlord didn't want her to look in was where he had been living. There was a pile of old, dirty blankets, rotten food, and empty gallon jugs everywhere. Even more creepy, he had plastered ripped-up pages from old porno mags all over the walls. The really scary part of this, though, was the basement. The man had tied a thin piece of fishing twine at shin level across the stairs about halfway down. The basement was empty, except for another pile of old blankets, a broom handle wrapped in leather belts, and a small box with a few rolls of assorted tape. Of course, Amanda ended up not moving in. This happened a little over 2 years ago. I was 21 at the time. After graduating college, I had been promised a good job in my small hometown on the coast at a bar cafe that was opening up soon. I had about 4 weeks before my start date, so I decided to go visit my sister for a week or two in the meantime. She lived in a big city about 5 hours away. While staying with her, I called my boss at the new job to ask her about my exact start date, but apparently the co-owner didn't like the idea of someone so inexperienced working at her new bar and decided that I didn't actually have a job. That would have been nice to know a week ago. My sister suggested that I look for a job in her city. I could stay with her for a few months to save money and find a place to live. This sounded good to me, so I took her up on the offer. After finding a job, I started to look on Craigslist for cheap one-bedroom apartments or people seeking roommates. Most of the people that I found that were looking for roommates were fairly nice, but either lived too far away from my job, suddenly revealed hidden fees that weren't in the ad, or other little things that just didn't work for me. Nothing awful, just not what I was looking for. I was starting to feel hopeless when I found one ad that sounded perfect. Washer and dryer, large living room, good-sized kitchen with a dishwasher, private bathroom, patio, and yard. Needless to say, I was interested. The person renting the room was a 55-year-old man, and he put in the ad that the roommate must be LGBTQ friendly. I was slightly put off by his age and the lack of photos, but I figured he was a gay guy trying to retain some privacy. I called the number listed and got no answer, so I left a voicemail and got a call back about 15 minutes later. He sounded nice. He told me his name was Roger and gave me some basic details about the place, including that he had a cat but would be okay with another one. He ended the conversation by saying, So, you should know that I'm a male to female transgender, and I'm gay. He sounded nervous when he said this, as if he was afraid I would suddenly change my mind. I laughed it off and said, That's perfectly fine with me, I'm a lesbian myself. We set up a time for me to tour the apartment and said our goodbyes. I was slightly confused. I figured he would relax after I told him I'm a lesbian, but he had just become even more nervous and shy. I didn't know what to think. When it came time to meet, it was around 9 p.m. and very dark. My brother-in-law came with me and we walked up to the apartment together. I was surprised that it was an apartment, actually. The way the ad was worded, it sounded as if it was a house that he owned. We knocked on the door together. I'm not sure what I expected, really. I guess I thought he would either be a very nice, older-looking man or an older, well-dressed woman. But instead, he didn't look that old at all and seemed as if he had been wearing the same normal dude clothes for days. If he hadn't told me over the phone, I never would have thought he was trans or gay. He looked displeased to see my brother-in-law with me and asked who he was. I explained that he was driving me around because I hadn't brought my truck back from my parents' house yet. Roger didn't seem happy, but welcomed us in anyway, locking the door behind us. He made some awkward conversation as I tried to control my temper. The place was disgusting. It was a huge mess of magazines, random papers, books, and knickknacks. The kitchen was filled with dirty dishes, and the dishwasher was broken. The washer and dryer were actually downstairs and outside, and my private bathroom was not private at all. It didn't even have a lock. Finally, he showed me the available bedroom. Again, I wasn't happy. It was completely filled with his junk. There was a large clothing rack in the middle of the room filled with leather jackets of every single style and size. The closet was also filled with all sizes of dresses. I had never met a male to female transgender that didn't know their size, organized their closet, and kept everything clean and cared for. He told me the clothing was just stuff he hadn't tried on yet, and asked me to be a doll and let him keep his stuff in my room. So many red flags. We went back into the living room, and my brother-in-law got a call from my sister. Roger unlocked the door to let him step outside, leaving the two of us alone. I asked a few more simple questions and made small talk. He eventually admitted that he had had 3 female roommates before me, and each one had suddenly packed their things and left overnight without telling him, so he was asking for a $100 deposit as insurance that I wouldn't do the same. Another huge red flag. He said the first girl kept flirting with him whenever her boyfriend wasn't around, and she would leave her door open while only wearing a bra. The second girl was apparently always getting drunk and sleeping in his bed, then getting angry with him and accused him of touching her in her sleep. The last girl suddenly felt the need to put a lock on her door. Roger claimed he wasn't sure why, but told me I could remove the lock if I wanted because it wasn't necessary. The last girl, of course, just like the others, left suddenly in the middle of the night without warning. I was beyond pissed that he was actually trying to pull this crap on me, but I played it off as if I was a shy girl while I bit my tongue. He was about to say something else when my brother-in-law came back in. We said goodbye, and Roger forced me into a hug, placing his hands on my hips in a sexual way, and then said softly in my ear, "I hope you come home soon, my dear." Now, if you know me in real life, you know that I don't respond well to people putting me in these positions where I feel uncomfortable and afraid. I get very, very angry. I promised him I would crack his skull if he ever tried to contact me again before pulling away and leaving. I could tell by his face that he knew I was serious, and luckily, I never heard from him again. After that experience, I learned to never trust anyone on Craigslist, and sometimes I worry about another naive girl trusting this creep and moving in with him. A few weeks ago, I flew out to the small town I'll be living in for grad school in order to look for a place to live. My boyfriend came with me, and before we left, we had researched many apartments on Craigslist and even set up a few appointments. Our first appointment was in the afternoon in a remote residential area. The landlord sounded fine over email and asked me to call him an hour before the appointment to confirm that I was coming. I called, but he didn't answer, so my boyfriend and I just started walking up to the house and hoped he would show up anyway. About 10 minutes before the appointment, he finally called and asked if I was coming. He sounded like an older man and had this very strange, slow way of talking. "Yeah, we're in front of the house now," I told him. He sounded extremely upset that someone was with me and even said something about how I had never told him I have a boyfriend. It never crossed my mind to tell him this information since my boyfriend wouldn't be coming to live with me. He was just helping me look for apartments during the trip. I told the old man this, and after a very long pause, he said, "I'm sorry, it's just, sometimes people don't tell me that they're married, and it surprises me. I'll see you soon." Then he hung up. I told my boyfriend what the old man had said, and he was immediately weirded out. He wanted to leave, but there weren't many choices in terms of real estate at this point, so I stupidly said that we had to stay, in case this place was the place. As we're discussing it, we see a man leave the house we're going to view. This man was young and extremely sketchy looking. Greasy hair, furtive eyes. He took one look at us and ran out of the house to his car and pulled away from the curb with a screech. Okay, so now we were both really weirded out, but it wasn't enough for us to bail just yet, and as we were looking at each other wondering what to do, the landlord finally arrived. He was in his 50s, very tall and very strong looking. His eyes were blank and empty of warmth or emotion. He slowly walked up to us and said, "I'd shake your hands, but mine are dirty." "What from?" my boyfriend asked. "Work," he replied flatly. He asked a lot of questions about me, like what I was going to school for, and where else I was considering living, while completely ignoring my boyfriend. The entire time, he was staring into my eyes without blinking. I tried to give answers that were as vague as possible. My boyfriend asked him a few questions as well, but he just refused to answer. Out of nowhere, the landlord said, "Let me just show you the basement." I should have immediately noped out of there, but I didn't. I kept thinking this was an eccentric old man from a small town and we were just being paranoid. My boyfriend, on the other hand, clearly wanted to leave, but ended up following us anyway to the back of the house, away from the street, to a detached shed. He opened the door and we saw that there were stairs leading down into complete darkness. He flipped the switch at the top of the stairs and the light didn't come on. You would think he would say something like, "Oh shit, the light's out," but he just said, and slowly started walking down into the darkness. Then he stood there without moving in the dark and said, "Aren't you coming down?" "There's nothing to see if the light's out," my boyfriend said. The landlord just stood there for a while and then slowly walked back up the stairs and closed the basement door without saying anything. He took us into the house and things got increasingly creepy. The front door, the only exit to the house, locked automatically, and the man got really upset when my boyfriend tried to fiddle with it. The landlord kept trying to box us into small rooms and kept reaching his hands into his pockets, only to take them out when he saw us looking at him. Both on Craigslist and in person, the landlord claimed that there was a grad student living in the house, but the house looked staged. There were neat piles of generic textbooks on the table, but nothing else that a 20-something might read. There was a bowl of fruit on the table, but no other food or utensils in the fridge or pantry. There were maybe 3 t-shirts in the closet. The landlord also had no idea what school the student was going to or how long he had been renting the house. Finally, the man managed to show us every room except for one. This one, he refused to open, claiming it was just the attic and there was nothing to see up there. Whenever we asked about it, he had a new excuse for not showing us. It was unfinished, there was furniture stored up there, or it smelled bad. This last excuse I believed, because even just standing near the door, it smelled terrible. We quickly said our goodbyes and bolted out of there. The man walked us out and pretended to go to his car to leave, but as we drove away, we saw him slowly saunter back into the house. My boyfriend was fixated on the idea that there was something seriously wrong with this guy, and Googled the man that night. We found out 3 things. He was a pillar of the community and known by a lot of townspeople. There was also no evidence of him owning or managing a real estate company like he had claimed, and his home address was listed as the very house we had been touring, the house where a grad student supposedly lived. After talking this over with my boyfriend, I've decided to contact Craigslist and the police department with information about what happened. The police said they could drop by for a check-in, and I'm still waiting to hear on confirmation from Craigslist, but at least his ad was flagged and hopefully it will be taken down. Thanks to everyone online who's given me advice. I finally realized that it's better to err on the side of caution and potentially save other people from harm. Plus, if the landlord is really innocent, at worst he'll just be inconvenienced. Hey everybody, sorry it's been a few days, but I've been on vacation with my family and I hadn't heard anything from the police until just now. They just sent me a message saying, "The information you provided has been reviewed and an investigation is in progress." I'll be scanning the papers and hoping they tell me about the results of the investigation, though it's probably unlikely. Hey guys, so the police finally got back to me about what happened when they went to the landlord's house. Kind of. I know things sounded creepy before, but they just got a whole lot creepier. Yesterday, my curiosity got the better of me, and I asked if anything had ever come of the investigation. I left a message, and they got back to me today. From what I understand, the police used my information to perform a wellness check on the grad student who the landlord claimed lived in the house. The landlord came to the door and told them that the student moved out already, and I think gave them a new address for him, but I'm not entirely sure what went down because the officer was being very vague with me. Anyway, I guess the officer running the wellness check still asked to look inside the home because it was protocol to make sure the grad student wasn't actually in there, in need of aid or anything like that. The landlord was very resistant, but had to let them inside. The police looked around and didn't find any evidence of the student being there, but she agreed with me that the landlord's behavior was off. When I asked her about the attic and the basement, she paused and seemed hesitant to tell me anything. Finally, she told me that the landlord eventually let them look in the rooms to make sure the grad student wasn't in there. I asked her if she found anything, and again she hesitated. Eventually, she admitted that they didn't find anything criminal, but there was definitely a strange smell in the attic, along with some carpet bags. I guess they weren't allowed to open those because the contents weren't in plain sight. What chilled me to the bone was that she said she went into the basement while her partner waited at the top, and she actually fell down the stairs because half the steps were all broken up and strangely ragged. Some of them were missing altogether. But there was still nothing to report down there or any sign of a student, so the police left. The officer seemed new or young, but really dedicated to her job. I'm not entirely convinced she knows exactly what she's doing, partially because she didn't have a very authoritative way of speaking, but she was really kind and sympathetic to me. I asked if this was the end of it, and she told me she was trying. I don't really know what that means, but I get the feeling that there's not much she can do legally, even though she said the investigation is still in progress. Before we got off the phone, she asked if I would feel comfortable with coming to the station and talking to her in person once I was in town. So that's that, for now at least. I'm not really sure where any of this is going, if that's the end of it, if that's the most the police can do, or if this officer is really going to pursue it and uncover something. I feel helpless and confused. I'm not sure if I should feel relieved that they didn't find any bodies. Also, this could be, and probably is, unrelated, but I received an email from an unknown sender today. All it said was it you? Creepy. There was a link in that email that I foolishly clicked on, but my computer's antivirus software caught a virus from the link and neutralized it, and destroyed the infected email. I ran more scans of my computer just to make sure it was clean, and it was only after that I wondered if the email wasn't just typical spam, but a message from the landlord. I'm probably just being paranoid, but I decided to include that in case anyone found it interesting. Maybe there'll be more information out there, but I kind of hope not. This experience has inspired me to be the kind of person who does something, instead of just standing back and hoping that there's nothing wrong. I called the officer again and told her about that email. She said it could probably be retrieved by an expert, but recommended that I don't try to do it myself. She also asked me to bring my laptop into the station when I move, but reassured me that it was probably nothing to worry about. I'll make sure to save any suspicious emails until then.